What's cracking, y'all? Welcome to this week's episode of Catholics with Bibles, and we are continuing along our journey of theology of the body. Y'all, there's just so much I want to talk about, and I just can't talk about all of it. So, for those who've been journeying with us in this throughout this mini-series, like I've said a few times now, go to like the TOB Institute in Philadelphia, or just buy the text itself if you want to read more of it. Because I'm having to skip, just a boatload of material, y'all. Just for the sake of time. I knew this mini-series was going to take me, a few weeks to say the least. I'm just trying to get through it. We are, as of this episode today, we are just over halfway through theology of the body, which is like crazy because we've been talking about it for like a long time now. So I'm saying that in short to know that I'm going to start making kind of bigger leaps, bigger jumps through the text. And I'm so sorry if that upsets you. But it's just, there's, like my passion for it is so strong, but my ability to talk about it in a succinct way in only a few weeks is so weak. Just know that's where we're at now. And this week we're diving into the next section of theology of the body of man when we created them, namely in the appeal to the resurrection. So this is a new shift from Pope St. John Paul II to a new text of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So we just are wrapping up from last week our final analysis of Jesus' appeal to the heart, right? Namely, in the Sermon on the Mount, where it says, anyone who looks at a woman in a reductive way with lust has already committed adultery in his heart, right? So we have the appeal to the beginning, we've appealed to the heart, and now we're going to appeal to the resurrection. So there's like three appeals of Christ. And it's super important for us to recognize that the truth of the resurrection is like Catholic dogma. Like it's in the catechism of the Catholic Church. Before we get too much into that, we have a Greek word of the day, because I almost totally forgot to say it. But now I'm remembering, so we're going to say it. So our Greek word of the day is eschatos, right? Or eschaton, eschatos. And so eschatos is just Greek for last, right? So eschatology, which is a term we use in theology sometimes, is the study of the last things. So this is going to be a really, really important term that JP2 is going to bring about a lot in this next section. So eschatology is tricky for a few different reasons. One of them being, I'm not going to list all of them, it's not going to be an exhaustive list of why it's tricky, but a few of them is, the first being that in talking about the last things, we are talking about things that no one has ever seen that still lives, right? So we aren't really working from experience at this point. We are working purely from revelation through what is revealed to us through Scripture, and we are kind of working backwards from the text, right? We aren't, like, nobody's ever seen heaven, right? And that's currently living to write about it kind of thing. Nobody's ever seen what it's going to look like or feel like, or when the end of the world's going to be. We just don't know these things, right? So it's tricky that way. Another reason it's tricky is even the text we have within the New Testament and the Old Testament, sometimes they're apocalyptic literature, right? So there's a genre, the apocalyptic genre, namely the genre of things revealed. It can be really kind of, not even abstract, it's not the right word, but it's apocalyptic language. What I mean by that, it's metaphor, it's analogy, it's symbolic language. It's not, and the biblical writers aren't trying to be precise in their descriptions of what they're seeing. They are using human language, which far underperforms in its ability to describe things of heaven, right, or even of hell. And so eschatology is the study of the last things for what's revealed through Scripture and tradition. And so this is going to be a really important topic in this next section, namely Christ's appeal to the resurrection. And so Pope St. John Paul II starts with this story of Jesus' interaction with the Sadducees, which let's dive into now. So this story appears in Mark 12, Matthew 22, and Luke 20. So really important to know that these three stories, it's the same story told through three different authors, and they're not exactly the same. So if you actually read, Mark 12, Matthew 22, and Luke 20, you're gonna notice differences, right? And so some people, some historical critical scholars, will say, look, they're different. It's not the same. Therefore, none of them are accurate. It's all just, oral tradition that we can't trust, yada, yada, yada. And we'll say, hey, bro, calm down, chill. First off, the fact that three different authors are quoting the same story actually gives evidence to the fact that Jesus probably did tell the story. Did certain authors maybe redact this story in a certain way for their audience? Maybe. Could Jesus have told this story several times to several different groups of Sadducees and therefore had different kind of nuances each time? Also a possibility. Either way, we're not going to dive into the arguments for redactive criticism, right? But just know that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you will see the same stories quite often. You'll see the same passages or the same sermons quite often. And so there's different theories on why that is, or why aren't they exactly the same. And one really popular theory that I'm kind of on the fence about is this idea of the Q source. And for those who are listening, you're like, Chase, what the junk are you talking about? Well, so you have this idea amongst historical critical scholars that out of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Mark was written first, and Matthew and Luke pulled from Mark in what's called the Q document. So essentially, the reason they think Mark is the oldest is because one is the shortest, which is kind of not the best argument, but whatever. And it's also just the language of it is also it's very blunt, immediately, right into his Roman audience, right? And so they argue that Mark is the first one, it's the shortest one, it's the most concise one, it's the oldest one, and yet there's this mysterious Q document, which there is literally no historical evidence of, right? There is literally not one scrap of papyrus, not one scrap of writing, nothing, right? This Q document is something that literally historical critical scholars invented to fit this theory, where it's essentially this Q document is a document listing all of Jesus' teachings, right? Writing them all out. Now, the argument can be made that the Q document isn't a document, but rather this oral tradition of Jesus' teaching, but that they're just also trying to work too hard around this Q document. But anyway, this theory is that Mark came first as a Q document, and Matthew and Luke, having access to the Gospel of Mark and this Q document, pulled from these two sources in order to compose their Gospels. And so why is this relevant in reading the New Testament? Well, in reading Matthew, Mark, and Luke, just know that a lot of the content's the same, not all of it's the same, but even the content that is the same, there's going to be slight differences, right? Like I said, it could be that Jesus told the story multiple different times to multiple different audiences. It could be that the authors slightly redacted or edited what he said in order to appeal to their audience. It doesn't mean the scripture is invalid. It doesn't mean it's not infallible. It just means that they knew truly the teaching, the heart of Jesus' teaching, and made sure to present it in such a way so that their audience could benefit from it the most. Okay, with that being said, sorry, random tangent, biblical theology, but hey, that's why we listen to this podcast, for biblical theology. If you want to learn more about the Q document and all that kind of hypothesis, read Ratzinger. He's the man. Talked about it sometimes. All right, cool. So we're going to dive into Matthew 22, starting at verse 24. So we read this story. The same day, Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection, and they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, and having no children he left his wife to his brother. So too the second and third down to the 7th. After them all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, to which of the 7 will she be wife? For they all had her. But Jesus answered them, You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowd heard it, they were astonished at his teaching. So the law that these Sadducees are quoting is the Levirate law of Deuteronomy 25:5. So just as reference, we hear this in Deuteronomy. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife, and perform all the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his brother who is dead, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. And if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, My husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him, and if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull his sandal off his foot and spit in his face, and he shall answer and say, So shall it be done to the man who does not build his brother's house. And the name of his house shall be called in Israel, the house of him that had his sandal pulled off. Okay, so having a sandal pulled off, having an unshod foot, it's like an insult. It's an old school insult. I'm going to pull off your sandal. It's like a mark of perpetual shame. And so it's this idea that if a man has no sons, his family name couldn't be perpetuated, right? So and this law only applies if the man's brother live in the same house, right? So if a man has a brother and his brother gets married and moves off to some other land or whatever, that brother who is already married and lives in another land isn't obligated to take on the brother's wife. But if brothers share the home, then the brother is obligated to. Okay, so this is the law, the Levirate law, that the Sadducees are quoting to Jesus, right? And so there's a lot that Jesus kind of lays out here. The first thing we want to talk about is, and that JP2 talks about, is that the Sadducees are posing this as a hypothetical scenario, right? Because we have to remember, it says right here, that the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection of the dead, right? One nuance that we have to understand too, that JP2 points out in his footnotes, because read the footnotes, like I said. Anyway, is that the Sadducees are one sect of Israel. And at the time, Judaism as a whole proper didn't have like a dogmatic teaching on the resurrection. Another thing to point out too, JP2 points this out, is that in the Old and New Testament, in Scripture, we're not going to hear the term resurrection of the body or of the flesh, right? We're going to hear the term resurrection of the dead. Why is that? Well, part of it's just language, namely that when in Scripture we hear the resurrection of the dead, it's applying that it's the whole man, right? So flesh is implied, but it's later on in Catholic tradition that the terminology in the creeds of resurrection of the flesh, resurrection of the dead, resurrection of the body, it's because it's to overemphasize the point that it's not just your soul that will live forever, this Platonic idea, but rather it's your very self, it's body and soul that will live forever. So, Jesus, he lays this out in response to the Sadducees who claim there's no resurrection. And the first thing he says is, you do not know the Scriptures nor the power of God. That's a double-sided insult, right? He's insulting them as people who claim to know the Bible, and he's also insulting their ability to interpret the Bible, right? So not only is he saying, you don't know your left from your right hand, you don't even know what color your hand is, kind of thing, right? That's a really weird analogy, but I said it anyway, whatever. It's an insult, right? He's saying they don't know the Scripture and they don't even know what it means, right? And he actually quotes this from Exodus, when God appears to Moses and says, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which the Sadducees, believing only in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Torah, they would have known that, right? And so, namely that God, so Jesus is saying there has to be eternal life because God said, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He didn't say I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He said I currently am. And God is not the God of the dead, but of the living only, right? So he's kind of Jesus pairing swords with the Sadducees. And a lot of the times Jesus will just ask a question back, which he kind of does here. But this is the time he kind of just puts his foot down and says, you guys are idiots. Here's the actual answer. And so we get into this idea of the resurrection. And this idea of it's a new mode of being. And Jesus' initial answer to this is that there is no marriage in heaven. And this, I think, is a tough truth for a lot of Catholics, especially a lot of married Catholics, right? I mean, we always say to our spouse, I love you forever, I love you forever, I love you forever. And you will, hopefully love them forever. You'll still love them in heaven, but we have to remember the point of the sacraments, right? And literally the last section of Theology of the Body, JP2 is going to talk about marriage as sacrament, and sacraments in general. But what is a sacrament? A sacrament is for layman's terms, it's a visible sign of an invisible reality. Namely, it's something given to us on earth that has efficacious grace, the grace insofar as it is a thing, in order to lead you to heaven, right? And so for another extreme example, there is no Eucharist in heaven, right? There is no, you won't see a tabernacle in heaven. You won't see the Eucharist in heaven because it's not needed. We will be eternally united with God. So that in the sacrament of marriage, we're going to get into later on, it's a sacrament. It's a sign with efficacious grace. Namely, when a man and woman come together, they, in their unitive act, they become a representative, they represent in a physical, tangible way the love of the Trinity, right? And so, insofar, and then doing that, they are filled with grace in order to love and to be a total gift of self to their spouse for the sanctification of their spouse, but also the procreation of children. To literally cooperate in the making of other Christians, right? And so a sacrament, there is no sacraments in heaven. There's no need for you to reproduce or to come together in this unitive way in heaven. Why? Well, because you're in heaven and you're totally filled up and you're totally united to God, right? People ask, is there going to be sex in heaven? And the answer is no, there's not. You're not going to have sex in heaven. You won't even want to. That's the thing that we don't understand. You won't even have a desire for it, which I think for a lot of married couples, you're like, what do you mean I won't have a desire for it? You literally won't have a desire for it. You'll be totally, totally captivated because you are going to see God as he is. You're going to see God face to face. And so you're not even going to desire it. There's not going to be a need for the sacrament of marriage in heaven, because the purpose of the sacrament of marriage is to get you to heaven. That's the point of all vocations, is to get you to heaven. And so once you're there, you don't need the thing that helps you get there, right? It's like a treasure. It's another weird analogy, a treasure map, right? Once you find the treasure and you have it in your pocket, you don't need the treasure map anymore, unless maybe to find your way out. But if you're trying to find your way out of heaven, that's problematic. You probably don't want to do that. But you don't need the visible sign of the invisible reality, because you are currently, and once you're in heaven, you are fully living in the now visible reality. So it's not merely just, the resurrection is not merely just your soul being awake after you die. No, it's a new mode of existence. And it's not merely just your current body gets woken up one day. No, it's it's a new mode of existence. So, Pope St. John Paul II, he quotes Theology of the Body, and he makes this really interesting connection. He's Pope St. John Paul II, talking about Aquinas, says, Aquinas had to choose between Plato's idea of a soul and Aristotle's. He did in his study. You had to choose between these two extremes, the Platonic idea of soul trapped in body trying to escape, or Aristotle's idea of matter and form making the substance of a thing, right? And so there's going to be some technical language here, which I'll break down, but I think it's a cool quote. And if I start reading it and you're like, Chase, you lost me, I'll explain it. Give me a second. So read this in the Summa. The soul, however, has one mode of being when it is united to the body, and another when it is separated from the body, while the nature of the soul remains the same. Not in such a way that being united to the body is accidental to it, But by reason of its nature, it is united to the body. So pausing real quick, what is that saying? So the soul, properly speaking, the nature of the soul is to be united to the body, right? That's the proper mode of existing, right? Yet, after we die and the soul leaves the body, it only leaves the body and exists still by a supernatural grace, right? Because that has to be a different mode of existence. Why? Because the soul is the form of the body, right? It's meant to be with the body, and the fact that the soul exists apart from the body in heaven is literally only possible through supernatural grace. So, and we're talking about accident, so not in such a way that being united to the body is accidental to it. So it's like, oh, it's just like, it's not, being in the body is not necessary for the soul, but it's something that is unnecessary, namely an accident. That's not what he's saying. It's not an accident, it's essential. So continue. If this, that is, being able to know only through the sensible phantasms, don't need to get into that right now. Anyway, if this is not from the nature of the soul, but belongs to it accidentally from the fact that it is tied to a body, as the Platonists held, the soul would return to its nature after the removal of the impediment consisting of the body. But, according to this view, the soul would not be united to the body for the greater good of the soul, but this would only be for the greater good of the body, which is irrational, since matter is for the sake of form and not the other way around. It belongs to the soul according to itself to be united with the body. The human soul remains in its existence when it is separated from the body, having a natural fitness and inclination for union with the body. If you're like, Chase, I don't know what you just read. Aquinas is tricky. But anyway, essentially, the reason Pope St. Paul II points this out is because we're talking about eschatology. We're talking about the last things. We're talking about the mode of existence after you die, right? And at the end of time. And so this resurrection of the body happens at the end of time. Yet there's a time, if you will, between when you die and the end of time. And so there you have three modes of existence, really. Your first is your current mode of existence, listening to this podcast, namely a fully human, hopefully baptized, matter and form, namely body and soul as a composite of human being. After you die, your soul, the form of the body, leaves the body and is united with Christ in heaven. And that is a different mode of existence than you were currently living in, because you don't have a body, right? But at the end of time, our bodies will be resurrected and reunited with our soul, but in a new, super amazing transubstantial way, right? It's like it's something we don't really know about yet because it hasn't happened, but it's this eschatological man that we're now diving into. This man not from the beginning, not before the fall, not even right after the fall, but rather the eschatological man that we're now looking at. So this is what Pope St. John Paul II calls it, and a lot of theologians call divinization. And so we have like 4 minutes to talk about this. So I'm going to just super, break this down. So anyway, divinization, deification, Christification, whatever you want to call it, is this idea, it's an ancient idea, namely that in order to enter into heaven, you have to share in the divine nature of the Trinity in some mysterious way. And I think we've talked about this in the podcast before. If I have, cool. If not, I'm talking about it again. But anyway, St. Thomas Aquinas says God became man in order that man become God. Not that we become God in like big G sense, but rather we participate in the divine nature in some mysterious way. And one way you can think about this is that God has a divine nature. His essence is divine. We have a human nature, which is infinitely different than the divine nature. And so heaven, what is heaven? It's participation in the union of the Trinity. But this Trinity is a divine nature, right? One nature, the divine nature. And so as human beings, we cannot get there by our own means. We can't get there naturally, because naturally we have a human nature, not a divine nature. And so what happens with Christ then? Well, the second person of the Trinity who has the divine nature totally in his possession takes on flesh, right? The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So he takes on a human nature, right? But he's not a human person. It's actually heresy to say Jesus is a human person. He was rather a divine person, the second person of the Trinity, with a human nature. So he has two natures, one person, fully divine, fully human, not a mixture, not a confusion of the two. There's a really funny YouTube video. I think it's called Lutheran Satire on this. So look up Lutheran Satire, and you'll see a couple Irish dudes. I forget which one. Anyway, it's one with St. Patrick. It's funny. But it's about the Trinity. Anyway, and so through our baptism, we are united with Christ in his human nature, because that's our common denominator with Christ, is our human nature. And so after Christ's ascension into heaven, he is in heaven, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And so even his human nature, right? So Christ has his cross bridged the infinite gap, right? So we enter into the blessed union of the Trinity through the humanity of Jesus Christ through our baptism, right? This is divinization in like a nutshell. I probably said some heresy in there. I didn't mean to. If I did and you listen to this, like, Chase, said that wrong. I'm sorry. But this is eschatology, right? This is the study of the last things, and this is the study of soteriology too, soter, salvation. And so this idea that at the end of time, through the power of Christ's resurrection, our bodies will be resurrected. Even the Catechism of the Catholic Church talks about this. And people ask, well, how is the resurrection possible? And the church answers, it's possible through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, through the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then last thing we'll talk about is this eschatological experience. And I'm going to quote directly from Theology of the Body here in audience 67, number 5. We read this. This eschatological experience of the living God will not only concentrate in itself all of man's spiritual energies, but at the same time reveal to him in a living and experiential way this self-communication of God to everything created, and in particular to man. That is God's most personal self-giving in his very divinity to man, to that being who has from the beginning borne his image and likeness within himself. Thus, in the other world, the eschatological world, the object of vision will be that mystery hidden from eternity in the Father, a mystery that has in time been revealed in Christ to be fulfilled unceasingly by the work of the Holy Spirit. That mystery will become, if one may express it in this way, the content of eschatological experience and the form of human existence as a whole in the dimension of the other world. Eternal life should be understood in an eschatological sense. That is, in the full and perfect experience of the grace of God, in which man can share through faith during his earthly life, and which, by contrast, will not only be revealed to those who will participate in the other world in all its penetrating depth, but will also be experienced in its beatifying reality. So we're basically out of time. The last thing I'll say, what he just said is that this amazing eschatological experience, this grace, that God's perfect self-donation to us, we can now live on earth through grace, through faith. With that, we'll see you next time on Catholics with Bibles. God bless y'all.